Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley here on SNY. We are going to be breaking things down with the Knicks and the rest of the NBA over the next half hour or so. Got two great guests with me today. First, we have senior NBA writer for ESPN, Chris Herring, also noted author of Blood in the Garden, a fantastic book on the Pat Riley 90s Knicks. Just a wonderful read. So be sure to go out and get that for the holidays if you haven't read it already. We got Anthony Donahue here as well. I really think Anthony Donahue was one of the first fan creators of content, if you will, on the internet. He used to do a lot with the Knicks and really was the first one online, I think, a fan putting stuff out there. And now he brings groups of fans to the Garden for home Knick games. So be sure to keep an eye on that at Anthony MSG. Before we get into it, we are going to be taking your questions and your comments. So be sure to throw those in there in the replies wherever you are watching us. And as always, let's get started with the baseline. Last night at Madison Square Garden was a rough one. Trae Young came in and had another, I don't want to say strong performance, but his third quarter was fantastic against the Knicks. 12 points, 5 assists in that third quarter when the Hawks really took over in the NBA Cup quarterfinals. Hawks going to Vegas, facing the Bucks Saturday. Knicks losing, going to Orlando to face a banged-up Magic team on Sunday. Chris, I want to start with you. Your general thoughts on what went wrong there for New York.
Well, there was a lot. I think, I remember looking at the scoreboard when it was actually working at the Garden last night. It was out to start the game. And at one point, I remember, I think around half, the Knicks were shooting something like 53%. The Hawks were at 36. And either at the beginning of the fourth or midway through the fourth, that had not flipped, but the Hawks had a better shooting percentage for the game than the Knicks did, which tells you how much better the Hawks were playing in that third quarter. They kind of really dug in, sat down, and defended, I think, and that made a big, big difference. The Knicks were just getting so many easy baskets, making an extra pass, and finding the Hawks out of position. And in the third, the Hawks got a couple stops. You saw the Knicks really struggle to get quick shots, which has been a big key for their offense this year, just in getting quicker looks with all the spacing and Towns and everything. And the Hawks were making them work the clock. I think they had 3 24-second violations, and you could kind of see the frustration building there. And on the flip side, the Hawks being able to get stops helped them to get out in transition. And, they're a team that in the half court can struggle a little bit, but it's a young group that has fresh legs for the most part. Trae Young is a fantastic passer, especially if he's in transition situations, and they got a lot of those in the third. And then in the fourth, I kind of made the comparison toward the end of the game once the Knicks fell behind. It almost felt like they pulled their goalie, so to speak, where the Hawks got, I think, 5 alley-oops in the last 6.5 minutes of the game. Trae Young assisted 3 of those, but the Knicks' backline defense was pretty awful just as they decided to start blitzing Trae. It was pretty clear that's what they were doing, and they weren't disguising enough about their coverage. They were just very boldly saying, we're going to come after Trae. And it's like, okay, you can do that with 2 people, but you're leaving somebody wide open. And it didn't seem like there was enough either thought put into that, or it was just such desperation at that point that the Hawks were getting way too many easy baskets at a time that the Knicks needed to play catch up. So, and obviously, how can I not mention that the offensive rebounding that the Hawks had in the second half? The Knicks were just nowhere to be found on the glass, and one of the worst defensive rebounding showings I've seen from them in a while. It was just not good enough to win a game that actually means something from the standpoint of the in-season tournament.
You nailed it all, Chris, and just a disappointing night for the home team. And Trae Young again in there and putting on a little bit of an extracurricular show with the dice rolling half court. Anthony, to you, Trae Young and the Knicks, is this a rivalry or what is it?
I mean, it's definitely become a little bit of a rivalry, and Trae Young has taken on the villain role. And to be honest, I kind of blame the fans that don't stop chanting with the F Trae Young chants, whether it's at the Garden or leaving a Yankees or a Mets game over the summer. And Trae Young has, bought into it. And he has a really solid game last night. And like you said, end of the game, he does the dice rolling twice. The Knicks players just stood there. Now, should the Knicks players gone and fought Trae Young? No, that's not necessary. But, just standing there was a little disappointing, but also it was disappointing that Trae Young came into Madison Square Garden and not just won a game, but won a big game for the in-season tournament. Some fans love it, some fans don't, but the bottom line is it was a big game last night at the world's most famous arena. Trae Young came in, had a huge third quarter, and left the Knicks and their fans sad again.
Yes, he certainly did. And one interesting theme, Chris, that I heard after the game, and I also heard it from the Knicks after their previous home loss. And so it's kind of become a common theme here where they say, they were not hitting shots on offense, and then they kind of let their defense sag a little bit, their energy on defense sag a little bit. To me, I give them credit for being candid, but that's something that you have to clean up. I'm just wondering, you've watched this team a lot. Obviously, they haven't found consistency yet. Where do you think this group can ultimately be? Do you think it can ultimately get there as well?
If I had to take one thing away from, I mean, we're about a third of the way through this season for most teams. I think if they could find a better blend between the team that they have become this season, which, it's not easy when you move in two new key pieces in your offense to be the number one ranked offense in the league. To do that this quickly, we can remember the first 2 weeks of the season, kind of the lack of synergy between Brunson and Towns getting 8 shots in a game. And then to try to fix that, Towns getting a bunch of shots, and he's been on ever since then. But Brunson's struggling for several games, just trying to kind of figure out when to pick his spots and when to call his own number versus when to look for Towns. How does that impact Bridges and the sorts of shots he's taking? Despite all that, they are the number one offense, but they are coached by Tom Thibodeau. And Tom Thibodeau only knows how to coach one way, which is to really get after it defensively, to be physically imposing defensively, to be a really good rebounding team. And they have had moments where they aren't that. Last night we saw the rebounding be an issue. We saw the defense become an issue in the second half. And, even as they've improved and they are no longer the 21st ranked defense or whatever, Towns is improving a little bit game by game as a rim protector. They still are not stout enough on that end of the floor. And I can't really recall a time earlier in Thibodeau's tenure where you would hear the Knicks saying, we're letting the way we're shooting dictate the way we play defense. When they had Elfrid Payton, if you were letting the shooting dictate the way you play defense, you were going to be playing terrible defense. So, from that standpoint, they have enough guys on this team that are defense focused, that's their calling card. That should not ever be the case. And I think it's risky if that's actually their candor and the truth, they're playing a different style of ball where they are more reliant on jump shots. They're more reliant on spacing. You can't let that dictate your defense and how hard you're going to play defense, because you're going to have offense. That's just the way it works. Even if you're the Celtics, you're going to have off nights. You still have to sit down and defend. So, again, like you said, credit to them for being candid, but I do wonder if there's a little bit more to it than that. And if there are structural problems, which it seems like there are. They got beat pretty bad when they tried to play their two big lineups last night to try to help the rebounding stuff. Towns still had foul trouble, which is an issue. And I can't help but wonder kind of when Mitchell Robinson will be back. I know Shams had a report, I think even yesterday, about that. But, for people that were hoping that Precious would really help by playing alongside Towns, there have been at least times where that's not really appearing to help a whole lot. If anything, it actually might hurt just because if Towns still has fouls that then you have to dig in and kind of go 3 deep as far as your centers instead of just 2.
Anthony, where are you at this point with this team? And obviously the identity is not the same as it was last year. Is that a problem for you? What do you think about the club right now?
No, the identity definitely isn't the same. And you bring up Precious Achiuwa. He should really petition the league to see if he can play in some sticky gloves, because those Butterfingers, man, he dropped so many balls last night. That was so stressful to watch. It's crazy because the offense has been awesome at times. Number one ranked offense in the league. Some nights it feels like we're putting up almost 200 points. But you look at the offense last night, like Chris talked about, so many times relying on threes. And in the NBA, so many teams do that. But relying on three, unless you're Steph Curry, you're always going to miss threes. You might get hot sometimes, like the Pistons did on Saturday night at the Garden, and the Knicks lost then as well. Also, the defense is not the same. No Isaiah Hartenstein. Mitchell Robinson hasn't played yet. And as great as Karl Anthony Towns has been on offense, he's not clogging the middle like those two guys did. So the defense has to get picked up. The rebound has to get picked up. And like Ian, you said, we have the personnel to play good defense. Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby. They got the nickname Wingstop before the season even started. And we're really not guarding anybody, and that's really surprising. And also, like Chris said as well, in the Elfrid Payton squad, if we looked at what we did on offense and to how the team played defense, that team would have been 0 and whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So the team doesn't feel at times they're always getting after it defensively.
Yeah, it's definitely not a traditional Tom Thibodeau team. At least it doesn't look like one at this point. And Chris, somebody who's playing pretty well consistently this year is OG Anunoby. You have an article out on ESPN.com today about what he's done on defense, and what have you found so far with OG?
I mean, he's been as good, if not better, than advertised. I think for him, it's generally always been, can he stay healthy? And obviously he has to this point in the season. He's actually, taken some hits and some falls at times where I wondered if he was going to be okay. But, to Knicks fans' joy, he's obviously been a healthy cog for them as their starting lineup has been for the most part. And he has been solid. Obviously has nights where maybe he's not great from three, last night being an example, but just the plays he makes defensively. Ian, I sit there on press row with you most nights, and just watching some of his sequences where whether it's blocking shots in either corner on consecutive plays and swatting the ball out of bounds. He's had so many blocks at the rim. He obviously had to play on RJ to kind of help seal the game against the Raptors the other night. He's everywhere, and I think that's a position that you want him to be in. For him to be able to play kind of a free safety role, for him to be able to float and kind of take a player if they're giving you particular trouble. He can guard a guard, he can guard a big man. He can help if he needs to kind of step into the lane and help on someone that's driving to the basket. I think what's challenging is that the Knicks, and I kind of made this reference in the story I wrote, I feel like he is trying to kind of ascertain what the biggest problem is. And on some nights, it's that the Knicks really are not good enough at the rim. And so you see OG making plays at the rim because he's realizing if I don't do this, nobody's going to stop, this dunk or this layup where he makes blocks at the basket. I think the other challenge, Bridges has struggled defensively this season. There's all sorts of numbers that kind of spell trouble from the standpoint of his point of attack defense. He's been targeted in pick and rolls more than any player in the NBA over the last 3 or 4 years, which is kind of jarring to think about given that this is someone that finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. But I think the biggest shift for him really is, one, teams are realizing in game planning, okay, let's run him into as many screens as we can and kind of test whether he wants to be physical enough to run through them or run around them. But also he hasn't been asked in the past, like he's a forward and he's being asked to guard the ball handler more often than he ever's been asked to do that, to play at the top of whatever the Knicks are doing. That's a little bit different. It relies a lot more on communication, which, we're seeing whether the Knicks are actually good at that or not. Towns was not asked to play center nearly as much as he's had to this season when he had Rudy Gobert playing behind him or alongside him. So that's a big shift, having him and OG, who's still relatively new to this group. And as we see, just talking to the media, he's not the most outspoken guy. It doesn't mean he's not more outspoken on the court, but it's still a relatively new group. Even when you just factor in OG, he's playing next to Bridges, which is new, and he's having to wonder what all can Cat actually handle at the rim, which is new, and how far up is Cat going to come to defend some of these plays and these actions, because that impacts Bridges and OG. So he's been great. As a two-way player, he's been better, I think, offensively than some people really realize that he was. But there's still stuff to fix even for him. But I think part of that is him just finding a comfort zone in terms of how much help do I need to provide guys, especially Mikhail, a guy that traditionally has not needed a lot of help defensively. But I think if you put these guys on truth serum, a lot of them would acknowledge we have to do a little bit more to help him too, because even if he's where he needs to be, if Towns is playing so far back that a guy gets a running start, or he's coming so high up that he can just run past Towns, that's not really good enough either. And I think the Knicks have put Bridges in a tough spot. He could be better, but I think the team has put him in a little bit of a tough spot as well.
For what it's worth, OG Anunoby and Karl Towns, they both said last night that, hey, we know that we haven't found consistency yet, but they said definitively, we have the personnel here to do it, and we're going to do it. Doesn't matter really when you find the consistency. It just matters that you found it, is what OG Anunoby said. And Karl Towns said, hey, the Villanova guys in particular in this locker room, they have history of winning, and so he feels confident that they will figure it out ultimately. But Anthony, I'm curious, man. You've seen so many Knicks seasons. You've seen them go sideways most of the time, but you've seen more recently, obviously, them have success. What is your read on this team right now? What is your confidence level on this team right now?
Also, remember, the New York Knicks are not 10-15. They're 15-10. Not too bad of a record at all. But obviously, there has been inconsistent play. Listen, they're not where they were last year yet, but I think they're going to get there. I'm not, like I said, Mitchell Robinson coming back will be awesome, but I'm not relying on that right now. I think they're going to be great. I think at some point, they're going to, like many Tom Thibodeau teams, at some point, they're going to reel off 12 of 15 games and they're going to be, before you know it, you're going to blink, and I think this team has the potential to be 15, 20 games over 500. Right now, it's pretty inconsistent. But think about this, though. It's been pretty inconsistent, and the Knicks record is still 15-10. Not too bad. The record is not too bad at all, but we definitely want to see more. Jalen Brunson, he's going to be better eventually. I do think the defense will get better. The rebounding has to get better. But like I said, like you said, Ian, I've seen a lot of seasons, a lot of bad seasons, a lot of seasons go south. This group is not like that. I'm definitely not happy about what I saw last night at the Garden. Not happy with what I saw Saturday at the Garden versus the Pistons. That was a bad loss to me. To me, that was a worse loss than last night. But I think they are going to get hot at some point, reel off a bunch of wins. But it's definitely tough, especially coming off last year with the fans. The fans were so attached to last year's team. And then also you have the pressure with Mikal Bridges, giving up all those draft picks to bring him in. So it's a lot of pressure on this team, but I'm really not too worried, but definitely frustrated at times watching, no doubt about that. Especially, when you're bricking so many threes, you're not getting rebounds, all those alley-oops in the paint last night. Oh my God, I was sick watching that. But I'm not worried about this group.
You know what, Chris, we talked about the rebounding. I'm just wondering, can this group get better rebounding the basketball? Is the personnel there? Because you see Karl Towns, he's rebounding at a career high level. You have the wings, but I just don't know. I mean, look, you had Isaiah Hartenstein, you had Mitchell Robinson, you had Julius Randle rebounding the basketball last year. Those three guys are not here. Maybe you get Mitch back, but I don't know if is the personnel there for this team to, be even average or a little bit above average rebounding. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I do think some of this was to be expected. As you mentioned, I think a lot of people had questions about just how much the identity of the team was going to shift. By losing a guy like Randall, and even Dante was a highly physical player. Yes. Towns has actually been impressive in the sense that I think he's been more physical than people were giving him credit for in joining this team. You mentioned his rebounding numbers. Leading the league in rebounding is not easy to do. I would call that a bigger surprise than the Knicks being number one in offense. What I guess the rebounding part, I'm curious kind of what part are we looking to improve? The offensive rebounding probably is what it is. This is a team that we've watched be number one in offensive rebounding in past years under Thibodeau. They're 21st at this point in the season. But when they get Mitchell Robinson back, I think that's one thing that they can improve on. But just the nature of their offense is 5 out. They're kind of prioritizing the offense that you're going to get just from the spacing more so than crashing really aggressively because that can lead to runouts if and when you don't get the rebound. I think that it was a trade-off. You were hoping to get more raw offense than you were hoping to get offense off second chance points. The defensive rebounding is interesting and something that I think maybe there's a little bit of improvement that they can make, but I think we talked a little bit about the scrambling that they need to do sometimes just because McHale gets caught on a screen or because Towns is kind of out of position and somebody gets to the basket. It forces the defense to kind of collapse. And then at that point, all bets are off as to who grabs the rebound. So I think as their defense, assuming it continues to improve over the course of the season, and it has a little bit, Towns has been better at protecting the rim statistically than he was 3 weeks ago. His numbers are starting to normalize just a little bit. I mean, I remember the first couple of weeks of the season, it was something like teams were shooting like 90% on him at the rim, and we knew that wasn't going to hold. So as stuff continues to normalize and as they just get a little bit better and more used to each other defensively, they're in better position to rebound. They can box out without worrying that someone's going to run up out of nowhere because they had to all collapse the paint. So I think that has a little bit of room to improve. But the flip side of that also is that Towns has been rebounding kind of above his head all season, in a way that we didn't expect. So I don't know if their rebounding numbers are going to meaningfully shift to where they're going to jump 7 spots in terms of rebounds, over the rest of the last 2/3 of the season. This is probably about where they're going to be, give or take a Mitchell Robinson addition. And at that point, then their spacing changes. So we'll see. But I'm wondering to some extent if this is kind of what they are as a rebounding team. Maybe they'll get a little better, but I wouldn't expect it to be a wholesale shift.
One thing that has impressed me is the way Josh Hart has fit into his role in the starting five. You knew coming into the year it was going to be a different role for him, that he was not going to get a lot of shots, that he wasn't going to get the ball in his hands a lot. But one thing the Knicks have done, which I found interesting, is they'll have him bring the ball up, a few possessions, because he's a guy who likes to touch the ball, needs to touch the ball, not even necessarily to shoot it, but he likes to kind of be in the mix. And I think he's done a really, really good job fitting in where the Knicks need him to fit in. He's been fantastic getting to the basket, great rebounding as he usually is. He's moving the ball. Anthony, Josh Hart, for you, I know you had a horse contest with him when he first came to New York. You almost beat him at Rucker Park.
Yeah,
here we are a couple years later.
I basically had to win. He did a dunk to beat me. I don't think that's a lot. I think like all bets are off when you're playing horse, but the other guy can't dunk. You can't dunk. You can't dunk.
It should have been outlawed. I'm with you. Just Josh and what he's done for 3-point shooting. How do you think he's fit into his role so far?
I tell you, man, Josh Hart has been awesome, and he's the classic example of an athlete that really just needed a home. He was only in LA for a few years, then he went to New Orleans, then Portland. It seems that he's going to be a Knick for a very, very, very long time, and he really does it all. He's been shooting the ball well. He plays great defense. He rebounds. He passes. Like you said, he brings the ball up. He is really the all-purpose player, and he brings so much leadership, toughness to this Knicks team. I mean, just look at the Knicks since they got Josh Hart back in late January, early February 2023. Before then, only about 2-3 games over 500. And since the Knicks acquired Josh Hart, that's when this team really, really started to take off. Obviously, getting Jalen Brunson was huge, but the Knicks really started to take off when they acquired Josh Hart back in 2023.
Yeah, there's no denying his impact, and we're gonna go now.
Won the first 9 games. First 9 games you won with Josh Hart. That's crazy.
He was unbelievable.
It's really insane to see all the little things that he does. It's incredible.
Yeah, and Knicks fans obviously eat it up. We're going to move now to a segment called What We Learned, presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system, according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. One note here, just trade season coming up. Free agents who signed over the summer, most of them are trade eligible starting Sunday. A lot of conversation around the Nets and what they may do, what they may not do. Teams in touch with them on Dennis Schroeder. They feel like, hey, it's going to take at least a first-round pick to get Schroeder out of Brooklyn. Now, the Nets have not set any kind of asking price or threshold on Schroeder, I'm told. And look, they value him a lot, right? He's done a lot for them on the floor, off the floor. So, with this team's history at the deadline, I could see a world where they even keep him and want to keep him as part of what they're building if teams don't meet that asking price. But a source did confirm Golden State has been in on Schroeder. Obviously, it could be a really good fit there. So just something to keep an eye on. And one other note, we talked about Dyson Daniels earlier, having such a good season in Atlanta. He came over there from New Orleans. Obviously, New Orleans struggling with the injury bug. Hard to judge that team. But one thing that is being judged, I'm told that highest members of the organization over there are questioning why they put Dyson Daniels in that trade. They're upset about it. And so, as you continue to watch that Pelican team, it's just something worth noting because Daniels, again, having a fantastic year. And that'll do it for our What We Learned segment. We're going to go to quick injury update, fellas. We're going to hit first Mitchell Robinson. Chris, you mentioned earlier ESPN reporting that Mitchell Robinson could be out till late January, could be out till early February. What I've been told is the Knicks are not going to rush him back at all. They want him to be fully healthy when he comes back. And Tom Thibodeau said recently that he just started kind of shooting on the court. I checked in on it, and I was told that he is not close to returning. No one wants to commit to a specific timetable, but not close to returning as we get into late December. So that tells you something about where Mitchell Robinson is. The good news is Landry Shamet, Tom Thibodeau says, is taking contact, right? And then he is coming back from that right shoulder injury. He's with the G League team. He's taking contact. Tom Thibodeau said last night that he is close, and I still think that Landry Shamet is in this team's plans. I do think that if he can make it back fully healthy, I know that some people over there feel like he can really help this group, so I'd expect them to sign him if he does come all the way back from that shoulder injury. And now we are going to get into the Talkback, and that is the section of the show where we answer your questions. We answer fan questions, and we bring in my friend and your friend, Matthew Spenley. Matt Spenley, it's always good to see you. What do you have for us?
Pleasure. Thank you guys for joining us today. I think someone's a little confused because someone in the comments is asking, has Pete Alonso got any offers yet? If so, how much? So, Ian, you got any insight on Pete?
Look, man, the Nets have to bring him back. That's all I know.
All right. You're on the record. Chris, I want to start with you with this one. David Katz from YouTube. Will Tibbs ever agree to bringing McBride and putting Bridges or Hart on the bench? It seems their best lineups have just 2 or 3 Wingy Hut juniors with McBride on point of attack. So we know the Knicks starters have played more minutes than any other lineup in the NBA this year. 6.3 net rating. I know it's a small-ish sample size. And with McBride in for McHale, that net rating's been really strong. Again, that's 40, 45 minutes of lineup data. But what are your thoughts on the lineups specifically that the Knicks have used beyond the starting unit?
I think that there are 2 separate questions there. Will they? I can't imagine that they will. Ian alluded to how many picks were spent on Mikal Bridges, and the idea that you could be asking him to, when his deal is up, after you spent that many picks on him, I imagine you're going to reach a deal with him and maybe hope that because of the nature of his relationship with Jalen and Josh, that he's going to give you a sweetheart deal of sorts too. The likelihood of wanting him to do that when also asking him to come off the bench is really low. And that's just the truth of the matter. Should it be an option? I think teams should always be open to the option of when you've got player X and the team performing better when player X is playing in place of player Y. They should be open to that. I think it actually gets right to the heart of what I was saying before about the idea that it's not natural for Mikal Bridges to have to guard 25 screen and rolls a game and then also be asking him to do more on offense when he's trying to find his offensive role on this team. That's a pretty big thing. And, lo and behold, for Deuce McBride, that is natural for him to do that. That's what he's always been asked to do, sometimes alongside Jalen Brunson, by the way, to guard the top of, the whatever's happening at the ball, the point of attack, to ask him to navigate screens. That's natural for him to do. That's natural for him to do with this group, with these guys behind him. So that makes sense that that group plays better when he's there as opposed to Mikal, who's still kind of learning the ropes a little bit with this group. But again, I don't see it as likely. I don't see it as even really feasible unless something drastic were to shift, unless Mikal were to start slumping terribly. And he kind of had that for a while offensively already. So I just don't think that there's going to be a rush to do that. I think that would kind of sound a 5-alarm fire. And I don't think the Knicks are going to do that given where they're at with Mikal and how new he is to this team.
And he's bounced back offensively, as you mentioned. I know, it's been a little up and down. Anthony, I want to ask you, because you're out in the Knicks Twitter streets with all of us every single day. It feels like every game with this team, given that they've kind of went all in with the Cat trade, with the Mikal acquisition, is almost an indictment on all of these, of the situations of the team, of where they're at. So I'm just curious, like a general temperature check and how you feel on a game-to-game basis when you're watching the team.
It's funny, man. Every game, and I love the passion of Knicks fans because I'm a passionate Knicks fan. But every game, here's the thing: when we beat the Raptors on Monday night, to me that was a nice win. And remember, I'm Mr. Positive here. Some fans were acting like we won the championship when we beat the Raptors the other night, and I'm like, okay, that's a little much. And then we lose last night, not a good loss at all. And some fans are acting like it was our 50th loss in a row. I wish people would just find a happy medium. So, like, for example, like last night, some people were hitting me like, oh, Ant, you're not even mad about the loss. No, I'm mad about the loss, but I'm also not going to be like, trade the whole team either. So for me, like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I said, didn't love the loss last night. Hated the loss on Saturday. But I wish some fans would just have a happy medium, even though the passion is incredible. When you beat an average team or a below average team by 2 points, that doesn't mean we're winning the championship. But if we lose a bad game on a Wednesday night to the Hawks, that doesn't mean we're going to be a 12 seed either. Come on, everybody. Try your best to find a happy medium. You feel me on that?
Life advice.
Couldn't have said it better.
Good life
Couldn't
advice.
have said it better. I mean, I also thought last night, too. I mean, just Atlanta's length and their wings also were – I said a lot about them. I've been impressed with them, and I think, we'll see.
The Hawks haven't played bad this year. They're a couple, 3-4 games over 500. They've been a decent basketball team, and it's the second time they beat us.
Absolutely. Ian, come to you with the next one. I'm just curious, the Cat comments yesterday when he was talking about, how Miami with LeBron, it took them a whole year to figure it out. I'm curious from your perspective how you feel about that. And now that we're 25 games into the season, I know I had kind of said going into the year with the Knicks, from the outside, just kind of being a fan, let's give it 20, 25 games and ask me where they're at. Well, we're there. So for your perspective, being around the team every day, how do you feel about Cat's comment and where the team is at right now?
I mean, look, they're still searching, right? I think offensive hierarchy is something that, as good as the offense has been, still really hasn't been established. Last year it was Jalen Brunson, and he would get first action, and then you look for him again, and he would create, whether it was a shot or a pass to a teammate. It's different this year, and I think that hierarchy should be established at some point. Hasn't been yet, but I think that if they are healthy, going into the postseason, OG Anunoby said it best. If you figure it out even on April 5th, as long as you figured it out going into the playoffs, there's enough talent on this team to play with anybody in the Eastern Conference over a 7-game series. So, yeah, I do think there's reason to be concerned about the consistency level at this point. But no matter when you find it, as long as you find it, I think that's what matters. And talking about the nightly referendum, I don't think that started with this team, man. I remember the Anthony Early days.
Oh, that's going on forever.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
The overreactions both ways.
Yeah. Lou Amundsen, maybe? Yeah,
Trey Burke was the next great Knicks point guard. We can't forget about these moments, guys.
I remember when we drafted Clay Anthony Early, they said he was the steal of the draft. So it's always here or there.
Yeah, so many guys over the years. The mid to late 2010s Knicks, just incredible stuff. All right, last question. I want to pose it to you, Chris, because I know we've talked obviously a lot about Mikal Bridges, and he'll always be a topic. But you brought up his defense earlier. I hadn't heard that stat that he's been the most attacked pick and roll defensive player, and I find that interesting because you mentioned he's someone that had a reputation as being a strong defender, and I think everyone could kind of see he's not at that level. So, in your opinion, watching the film and watching the team play, do you think this is something that this is just how he is now and it's not going to improve? Or do you think that maybe it's a new situation? I'm just curious with his defense, do you think it will improve?
Well, I think it can. First of all, it's so early with such a different situation. I mean, I know he just moved across town, but it's a different sort of team that operates differently, that's asking him to do different things. And by the way, I think a lot of us, myself included, often think of, man, now you get to be a third, maybe even fourth option offensively. That's easier. And in theory, it is, right? But think about some of the stuff that Josh Hart has said in the past of, I need to touch the ball a certain number of times. Otherwise, I feel pressure that I'm only going to get one or two shots. And if I miss that one or two shots, it feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders when I do actually get the ball. So Mikal Bridges was asked to be a number one, number two option in Brooklyn, um, for a team that was going nowhere fast. That's very different than being under the pressure of playing in the Garden, having people dissect your shot so much in the preseason when you kind of have a struggling preseason, to where in the first half of the game, people are like, oh God, what have we done against the Celtics because Mikal has a bad half. So it's just a different level of pressure. Absolutely, he can get better as he adjusts to that, as he adjusts to the noise, as he adjusts to his teammates, as he gets used to the positioning of guys, as he gets used to what he's being asked to do, which, as you pointed out, is fundamentally different. Mikal was not a defensive player of the year candidate because of his point of attack defense. He was a defensive player of the year candidate because he was a great help defender, a great team defender, a great one-on-one defender that could go up against the best player that any team had. And frankly, that spot has kind of been a little bit more reserved for Anunoby. And so that's why, again, when we talk about that question that you posed of, is it better? Should the Knicks be looking at Deuce McBride a little bit more to plug him into the starting lineup? Again, I don't think it's anywhere near realistic right now, but I do think that the role that Deuce would be taking from Mikal would be more natural for Mikal if he could maybe guard, the top option on the wing as opposed to it being the ball handler all the time. That's a big shift, and it kind of allows him more rest as well to just not have to guard a Trae Young for possessions after possession after possession. That's a tough task. It's not to say that he can't do it, but it's tough to do that. And also, why isn't he going to the basket? He might be tired. Like, it's not. I'm not trying to give the guy outs and excuses, but I think he can naturally get better just because he's being asked to do a lot of different things from what he's been asked to do in the past, at least over the last year or two. And so I think it's just an adjustment. He will get better with that, but will it be enough to where the Knicks can look back and say this was worth 5-6 picks? I don't know about that. And I don't know in this current role really how much better he's going to get, because he has shot well. He shot much better in recent weeks. He shot well from mid-range. It's just a different version of a player than we thought that the Knicks were going to be getting, I think.
For sure. And like we said, so much of the season left. That's what I got to say for you guys. I know, Ian, if you wanted Pete Alonso back with the Mets, I know he's about to tune into Juan Soto's introductory press conference on SNY in about an hour, right, Ian? You're locked into that?
Must see TV. Digital.
Chris, Anthony, are you guys baseball fans? Are you guys Yankees, Mets?
I'm a Yankees fan, Bronx boy here, so.
Ooh.
I'm kind of, I have my White Sox hat over here. I'm from Chicago, so I'm kind of ashamed to admit it.
Chris. I don't know about that.
I just claim Michigan football, really. Ian knows that more than anything, and I let that overshadow everything else. But
you got a World Series in 2005, though. It's pretty cool.
That was fun. It was a long time ago. It was fun. Very fun.
All right, that's all I got, fellas. Thank you for joining, Ian.
So yeah, we're gonna wrap here, fellas. Knicks obviously going to Orlando Sunday, and then not playing again until Thursday at Minnesota. I know there's a lot of focus on the minutes guys are playing. People I've talked to, I haven't heard any concern internally about minutes load and kind of where they are. I just want to ask you guys, yes or no, should there be concern about the minutes, Chris?
Just the raw number, per game and stuff like that, not so much. I'm not as worried about that. What I do take issue with, and I said this the other night, I was sitting next to you when it happened, Ian, when we look up and all of a sudden we're realizing that Mikal Bridges has played 45 minutes in a row in a game that they were comfortably ahead in. I do worry about stuff like that, just because I think when you have guys out there that are playing without a breather at all, that puts them at greater risk for injury as opposed to pulling them and having them on a normal rotation. Again, particularly if the scorer is not really calling for that. We're not in the playoffs. We're not even close. At best, we're talking about an in-season tournament, NBA Cup game. But that's the sort of thing I don't quite understand, let alone, when the Knicks are up by 24 with 3-4 minutes left and you're still looking at 3 starters out there. I don't get it. I probably won't ever get it. But am I concerned overall? Generally speaking, no. It's more stretches like that concern me.
Yeah, I don't get that either. The up big and starter still in there. Anthony, what about you? Concerned?
I echo everything Chris said. I'm a big Tibbs guy, but yeah, playing a guy 45 minutes in November, December, little strange. Listen, if it's game 5 of the Eastern Conference playoffs, fine, you got to do it. And also, yeah, 3 minutes left, you're up 25, 30 points. There's no need for starters to be there, but for the most part, not too concerned. These guys are professional athletes in phenomenal shape. They're not running crazy fulls on off days, so I'm guessing the games are probably easier for them. But those little things, again, playing a guy 45 straight minutes, you probably shouldn't do that. And, when you're up 25, 4 minutes left, I think it's okay to yank them.
We're going to leave it there, guys. Chris Herring, senior NBA writer for ESPN, author of Blood in the Garden, a fantastic Knick book about those 90s Knicks, and Anthony Donahue, the first guy, I think, to create fan content online. He really started a big trend here, and he brings groups of Knicks fans to the Garden.
And videos also. Chris used to come on those videos, if you remember. And you did as well. Remember Spreecast?
Absolutely.
Spreecast.
Absolutely. Bring it back. And Anthony, he brings groups of Knicks fans to the Garden for Knicks games, gives them a fantastic experience. So check him out at Anthony MSG. That's all for us. But we will be back with you guys. Our next show, December 18th, here on the Putback, right after that Minnesota game. So it'll be interesting to see where the Knicks are at that point.
Thank you, Ian.